Charles Taerk. I'm president of Faircourt Asset Management, and we are the portfolio advisors for the Ninepoint Alternative Health Fund. We wanted to talk a little bit about a recap for 2018 and look towards 2019 and see what we see in store for the new year. As we look back on the performance of the North American cannabis sector in 2018, we see many periods of abrupt market change. During the year, there were actually 4 periods of more than 25% growth, while there were also 3 periods of more than 25% declines. The sector weakened into year-end from the most recent peak of November 7th. And that weakness was driven by a number of industry-specific factors, as well as macroeconomic and geopolitical factors that affected global equity markets in general. But we're very proud that despite the market volatility, our fund performed well, producing an annual return of 17.5% for the F-class units, and that was for the year. And when you look at that performance relative to the marijuana index, the index had a significant loss of 24% for the year relative to our gain of 17.5%. And if we look to the passive strategy, the ETF, that also lost close to 20% in 2018. So again, it's a reminder of our active strategy, our portfolio allocation, and how we look at the different companies that really generate differentiated performance. Investors should not lose sight of the fact that there were some remarkable developments in the sector over the last year. We believe that 2018 will be looked back upon as a turning point for the global cannabis industry. It was a year that saw more than 20 countries legalize medical marijuana, bringing the total to 42. It was a year where we saw the first NASDAQ IPO for a Canadian cannabis company. It was also the year that they saw the passage of the Farm Bill legalizing hemp federally in the United States. There are now 10 states in the US that are legalized for recreational purposes, and over 30 states that are legal for medical marijuana. And let's not forget what we believe is a significant change, and that was the FDA approval of the first botanical marijuana drug, Epidiolex, that treats and controls seizures from epilepsy, all taking place last year. So it was a significant year. Another significant development in the industry saw leading companies within industries impacted by the growth of cannabis becoming strategic allies. We saw Constellation Brands, a NASDAQ-listed company that distributes iconic liquor and spirits brands like Corona, Modelo Especial, Robert Mondavi. They invested $5 billion into Canopy Growth in August, giving Canopy a war chest for growth and product development as the company looks to expand into new markets with new products around the world. Then in December, Altria, one of America's largest tobacco producers, announced a $2.4 billion strategic investment into Cronos Group, and that's going to assist Cronos in its global expansion plans. Then later in December, Altria then invested $12 billion US to acquire 35% interest in a company called Juul. Juul is one of the largest vape companies in the world and will have significant implications for Cronos as it develops vaporizers and other effective delivery methods for its products. Altria, by those 2 bold moves, is becoming a major player in the global cannabis industry through those investments. And then we look at Tilray. It entered 2 major collaborative agreements during the last month of the year. First, the LP signed an extension of its existing agreements to collaborate with Sandoz AG, a global leader in generic pharmaceuticals. It's part of the Novartis group of companies. Their goal is to develop non-smokable, non-combustible medical cannabis products for global distribution. And that announcement was followed by another announcement from Tilray, this time with AB InBev, one of the world's largest brewers. The focus of their agreement is to develop non-alcoholic beverages containing THC and CBD. We believe that the Tilray-Bud partnership, Bud is the stock symbol for AB InBev, that partnership is also noteworthy because it also validates the opportunity launched last summer by HEXO out of Gatineau, Quebec. That agreement with Molson, it confirms our previously communicated view that these partnerships with pharmaceutical, alcohol, and tobacco companies represent major catalysts for the global cannabis industry. So with several leading Canadian companies with established global players, who's next? There are companies like CanTrust and Organigram that could be next in line as candidates for global strategic arrangements. Overall, we anticipate more global expansion plans being announced by the Canadian LPs in order to maintain their leadership in the global cannabis industry. Early expansion in the global market, when U.S. competition is still precluded from operating, allows Canadian LPs to establish a solid global footprint well ahead of future competition. We believe that in 2019, these trends are going to continue. We see that more countries will move to legalize for medical marijuana. Additional U.S. states will legalize adult recreational usage. And there will be additional strategic investments in joint ventures from alcohol, tobacco, and pharmaceutical companies. We also see the scientific development, including formulation, genetics, dosage, delivery, and alternative traditional cultivations becoming more important. As the new year begins, when we look at our portfolio, our Canadian cannabis weighting has been reduced, particularly our exposure to pure cultivation. We've got greater focus on those companies that offer value-added products, oils, extracts, gel caps, and other dosage formats that are generating higher margins. The logistical challenges faced in the early days of the recreational rollout are going to remain, and they're going to be an overhang for some Canadian LPs for at least the next 2 quarters, as the rollout of stores and SKUs and customer traffic have all been affected. Many investors did not anticipate the challenges faced between LPs and the provinces, and that has led to reduced market sentiment. It's going to be interesting to see how LPs address the supply-demand imbalance, the store rollouts, the ramp-up of supply, and the build-out of their brands over the next several months and years. We've seen Health Canada release draft guidelines for the production, distribution, and sale of vaping products and edibles in late December. Edibles and vaping products are scheduled for release in October of 2019, so the government has provided these guidelines well in advance, which should allow for a smoother rollout. As edibles continue to grow in variety and demand, the category will become a significant component of the adult recreational market and progress towards their introduction into the Canadian market. It's going to be an important step for the overall success of the cannabis market. When we look at the U.S. states with adult recreational usage have seen significant demand for vape, edibles, topical creams, and beverages. We believe that it will be important for the federal government to bring these products into the market in 2019. It will be important from a revenue generation standpoint, both for government tax revenues as well as for the LPs and their earnings, as these products are all higher value added and higher margin SKUs. It's also important from the standpoint of reducing reliance on the black market, as products that are in demand in convenient locations and offered without supply limits will mean an overall flourishing industry. There are some challenges ahead. Canadian LPs managing a successful ramp-up in production while containing operating costs. So when we look at our portfolio, we continue to prefer Canadian names such as Organigram, HEXO, and CanTrust that all have lower cost of operations and continue to ramp up production on schedule. Being on schedule is really important. Organigram has supply contracts with 9 of 10 provinces, Quebec being the only exclusion. It also continues to be the lowest cost producer in the country and continues to add more indoor cultivation. Currently, they're at 36,000 kilos of annual capacity and will grow to 62,000 kilos by the end of April. HEXO has the strongest presence in Quebec, with a long-term 5-year contract with the province of Quebec, the only LP to have such an agreement. And Hexo just announced at year-end that it is now licensed with 100,000 kilos of annual capacity. Its fourfold production expansion has been successfully brought online on time and on budget. Now, given the Quebec population is roughly 34% of the country, it's estimated that Hexo will have about 9% of the entire national market. So when you consider its JV with Molson's, we believe that Hexo is well positioned for both Canadian and global markets. CanTrust, a pharmaceutically focused LP, continues to be the Canadian leader in patient growth. As well, its percentage of revenues generated from extracts at 61% of overall revenues positions it well as a value-added producer with higher margins. We continue to believe that increasingly, as the quarterly results are released, investors are going to judge the companies by their performance. It's no longer about just production ramp up. It's about revenue and it's about efficient operations and earnings. Getting facilities up to full capacity will be important to deal with supply shortages currently hampering the industry. We believe that increasingly LPs will be judged by their ability to meet their previously announced projections, their revenue growth, and the expectations by investors. As we saw in November with Q3 results, investors are losing patience. Another aspect that the LPs will need to work on is branding. There's going to be an increased focus on branding in 2019 as more stores and more SKUs are rolled out to the recreational market. The first weeks of the rec market witnessed people buying without awareness of brand, more for the experiment of purchasing in the legal market. But as time goes on, consumers will be influenced by brands and benefits. The winning LPs will be those that can communicate effectively in this highly regulated Canadian market. So a key theme for foreign markets in 2019 will be the opening of new medical markets. Over the last 24 months, the world has gone from 10 countries to 42 countries, representing an addressable market of over 1.5 billion people that now have some form of cannabis medical legalization. We believe that as more research is undertaken, more countries will legalize for medical purposes. And that's a significant opportunity for leading Canadian companies to continue to expand their global footprints. We believe in the global medical market and the long-term growth of that segment of the cannabis industry. And part of the global growth is the progressive legislation that's taking place in the United States. We have increased our weighting in the portfolio of U.S. multi-state operators in legal medical states. There are now 32 states that are legal for medical purposes and 10 states plus the District of Columbia that are legal for rec. Altogether, that represents approximately 70% of the U.S. population. Now, despite limitations at the federal level, these markets are operating effectively with leading operators generating significant revenues and growing cash flows. In 2019, we believe there will be further regulatory enhancements that will benefit investors in U.S. multi-state operators. At the national level, the 2018 Farm Bill, passed by Congress in December and signed into law by the President on December 20th, includes sections to remove hemp from the Controlled Substances Act and placing federal regulatory authority of hemp with the USDA, allowing state departments of agriculture to control hemp cultivation and production. Already, many legal dispensary markets offer CBD creams, oils, beverages, and medicines. Just CBD alone, without the psychoactive THC content. National legalization further opens CBD to more markets, allowing MSOs to cultivate. MSOs are multi-state operators. So it allows them to cultivate, brand, and distribute more diverse product offerings throughout the United States. We believe that one of our top holdings, Stanley Brothers, or CWEB, as the stock symbol is one of the largest hemp producers in the U.S. and a top 10 holding, famous for its Charlotte's Web line of CBD products. It's going to take advantage of these regulatory changes. Now, there are also Canadian LPs that are going to be able to take advantage of U.S. hemp cultivation laws. Village Farms has a 5 million square foot Texas vegetable greenhouse facility that can be converted to hemp production in less than 9 months. And Canopy Growth, with its recent purchase of EBU, a Colorado-based hemp cultivation company, is well in the lead. In addition, its first mover advantage and its large war chest has turned into securing one of the first hemp licenses in New York State, secured during the early weeks of January. We believe that 2019 is going to be a big year for hemp production. Another interesting dynamic taking place in the U.S. is the changing landscape of those states that are legal for medical purposes, adding recreational legalization. State governments and governors have watched the significant tax revenue collection in early adoption states such as Colorado, Nevada, and Oregon, where tax revenues have reached hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue intake for the state from cannabis retail sales alone. Increasingly, we believe that more states will adopt recreational laws as neighboring states offer recreational access, potentially taking tax revenues away from individual state coffers. By example, a review of the Northeast sees Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine all recreational, forcing neighboring states to adjust or lose potential tax revenue gains. So increasingly, we see the Northeast becoming legal for recreational adult usage. If current trends continue, it's likely that sometime in the next 2 years, a majority of the U.S. population will live in states that have legalized recreational use for cannabis. Additional regulatory changes includes the potential of the States Act passing through Congress. And the States Act will be another major catalyst. The focus of the States Act is to allow federally regulated banks to provide services to legal cannabis businesses while also normalizing the tax treatment on certain expenses of cannabis business income statements. These are important goals for the business to regularize these operations within both the IRS and the national banking system. We also see governors making increased announcements about legalization. We've seen recently New York Governor Cuomo stating his intention to legalize for recreational purposes, with New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and other Northeast states joining. In the Midwest, Michigan has voted to legalize for recreational adult usage, and we anticipate that Illinois will move forward with newly elected Governor Pritzker publicly stating his preference for recreational legalization. These changes offer larger opportunities for the incumbent multi-state operators operating in those states, with early brand recognition and dispensary locations that have already been established. As a result, some of the MSOs that we own include Curaleaf, Harvest Health and Recreation, and Green Thumb Industries, we believe are very well positioned to take advantage of the coming changes. It's important to note that in Canada, as a comparison to the US market, despite the federal illegality, each of those 4 companies that I mentioned have more stores, more dispensaries in operation right now than the entire Canadian country. Let me say that again by example. Curaleaf has 42 dispensaries that operate in 12 different states. In Canada, we do not have 10, I believe, dispensaries open. So that is why we believe that increasingly we should be investing more south of the border until such time as the Canadian recreational market gets organized. Overall, we believe that 2019 will be a positive year for the industry. However, companies in the sector are going to need to execute and show improved financial performance. We believe that there will be significant differences in stock performance. Important metrics will need to be met, like sales growth, market share, earnings, and for those who are pursuing it, results from international sales. The cannabis sector continues to maintain a higher than average level of volatility, symbolic of an early stage sector where there isn't wide research coverage. This is where we believe that our fund stands out. We offer an actively managed approach that also offers a wider portfolio allocation than merely focusing in the Canadian cannabis sector. With different segments in the global alternative health market, our strategy also allows the fund to build periodic cash weightings when there are periods of weakness, enabling our team to adjust our positions and wait for a better opportunity. In addition, we offer the opportunity to invest in select private companies that are poised to go public in the near term. Our long-term view has not changed. This industry continues to have the potential to create major disruption in the beverage, pharmaceutical, as well as health and wellness categories. However, it will not be a straight line trajectory up. We believe that active and agile portfolio positioning will be key to successfully navigating these challenges while benefiting from those longer-term opportunities. I want to thank you for listening, and on behalf of my partner Doug Watterson and the entire Faircourt team and everyone at Ninepoint, appreciate your listening, and we appreciate your questions to come.